Many of you this summer have been heading out to the lake as levels continue to rise at Lake Mead. But even though the levels have improved over the past few months with all the rain and the snowfall, you can see it's still far below what it could be at full. So scientists, some of them, have a solution to fill up Lake Mead. It's pretty drastic. To do just that, it would mean taking all the water out of the Colorado River system and draining Lake Powell.
We need to start making plans for prioritizing Lake Mead. It's the more important reservoir.
Some scientists and conservationists have been lobbying the feds to make this happen. Fill Lake Mead first. There's a drastic way to do it. Empty Lake Powell and put all the water back into Lake Mead.
If there isn't enough water in the system to fill both Lake Powell and Lake Mead, we should prioritize storage in Lake Mead. This would actually increase the water security at Lake Mead. The science is showing that it could save some water because less would be lost to evaporation.
The mission of the Glen Canyon Institute is to phase out the Glen Canyon Dam entirely. They describe the dam and Lake Powell as one of the most environmentally damaging projects in American history, putting fish, wildlife, and ecosystems across the Grand Canyon in peril. The historic drought's already dried up water across the Colorado River. It's made boating ramps at Lake Powell unusable. The efficiency of the Glen Canyon Dam keeps shrinking. He says the feds must instead save the far more crucial Hoover Dam to supply power across the Southwest. But even if you dumped all the water from Lake Powell into Mead, we'd only see it at 70% full.
Glen Canyon Dam was not designed to operate at low levels.
The group submitted the proposal to the Bureau of Reclamation. Fox 5 also reached out for their take. We're waiting for an answer. Balkin says he knows it won't happen, at least now.
We need to start working on it now because time is not on our side.
So the Colorado River Compact, that makes up the water rights and the divvies it among the states. It expires in 2026. The Institute hopes this idea is going to be considered more seriously when that expiration date rolls around.